Hey, Larkin Rose here. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Holy cow. I just saw something, and I had to just grab a microphone and make a video about this. It's not even going to be a video. I'm not even bothering to grab a camera. I'm going to do this in one shot, not edit it and post it. Just amazing. Almost fell out of my chair. I was trying to watch some other thing on YouTube, and one of those commercials comes on that comes on first, and it's a preview for a movie coming up in June or something called The Purge. And oh man, did I almost fall out of my chair. Talk about desperation on the part of the Statist to do just insane propaganda. Now, again, I only saw this thing once, so this is just the impression I got once through it. The premise of this movie, as I understood it, is for one day, the government won't enforce any laws. They won't prosecute any crime. So, of course, in the elitist, authoritarian Hollywood mindset, that means everyone will become violent, horrible animals and will be cannibals and killing and eating each other all over the place, and it's chaos and mayhem. But man, talk about desperate statist propaganda. I wonder how much the Obama administration paid him to make this movie. We got to get the message out there that if we don't have this massive ruling class enforcing the law, we'd just be horrible wild animals killing and eating each other. So, and maybe it's just kind of some idiot Hollywood guy who thinks that about reality and it's a premise for a scary movie. So, of course, in this, again, this is a very short trailer I saw. And I only saw it once. I didn't know it was coming. I'd never heard about it before. But so this is all just based on the impression I got from 20 seconds or something. But the message is just so obvious that, oh gosh, if government weren't protecting us, it would be cannibals and mayhem and death and destruction. I mean, the title is The Purge. So, and it doesn't even explain why. Now, I got the impression from the trailer that people are told ahead of time that there's going to be this day where we don't prosecute any crimes. Oh my gosh, no authority, what's going to happen? Oh, and of course, so they predict mayhem and doom and gloom and chaos and death and destruction without authority to keep us in line, to keep the rabble in line. So, other than just having to comment on the just open desperation that the control freaks are going into. Here's what it would be if we weren't there to save you. Just, wow, how transparent can you get? But other than pointing out that, I'd like to give a little bit more realistic prediction of what would actually happen if the government said, yeah, coming up for one day, we're not going to prosecute any crimes. First of all, and again, I don't know anything about the movie except what I just saw in this trailer that made me almost fall out of my chair. So I don't know the details of what they pretend happens, but of course it's chaos and mayhem. First of all, a whole lot of the country wouldn't care because they're armed. They'd say, well, it's the same as today as it was yesterday. If I call because someone's committing a crime, the cops aren't going to show up on time anyway. Like already, most crime is never prosecuted. In a whole lot of major cities, if you go and report anything short of a murder, they write it down on a piece of paper and never do a damn thing about it. So that's already what happens. Most real crimes against people, like crimes with victims, never get prosecuted or investigated anyway. So, this might happen. This happens every stinking day in the country. But aside from that, most of the country isn't going to care because they have guns, and that's what they go to. If somebody tries to attack them, they don't go for the phone to dial 911, they go for the gun safe to defend themselves, which works really darn well. Now, in the places where people have been disarmed by the parasite class, in the name of safety, of course, assuming people have advance notice that on this day no laws will be enforced, there will instantly be a giant market for protection services and for gun dealers. Every gun store in the country would load up a van with guns and drive into the worst parts of the city where guns are illegal for that one day and say, okay, who wants to be able to defend themselves today? Because it's going to get pretty nasty, in theory. And so there would instantly be giant gun sales. If there were criminals dumb enough to think, yay, now I can get away with it. And frankly, I don't think, as dumb as criminals are, I don't think they're that dumb. I don't think they think that police not doing anything would make that big a difference. Police already don't do anything in the vast majority of crimes that happen, and the criminals know it. So the criminals, I doubt, would actually think, now is our chance. They'd think, it's just like every other day. Except they'd think, except if I victimize somebody and they blow my damn head off, nothing's going to happen to them, and they know it. So there would instantly be a market in protection services and in gun sales around the country of anybody who thought, well, I guess I better be able to defend myself this one day. But there's another thing that I predict would happen. Now, some of this I wouldn't mind seeing happen. Some of it I don't at all condone, but I think would happen. Which is, if for one day no laws were enforced, I'm betting every IRS office in the country would be burned to the ground. And lots of police departments would find their cop cars, all their windows smashed and their tires slashed and their offices smashed up, and all the narcotics agencies and the DEA and the ATF would be vandalized and destroyed. I wouldn't mind that in the slightest, because what those agencies do every single freaking day is initiate violence against innocent people. Now, another thing that would probably happen all over the place that I don't condone, I think it would happen, but I wouldn't condone it happening or advocate it, is I think a whole lot of tax collectors and bureaucrats would get killed. Because if there was one day where the victims of these bastards had a chance to get revenge and nothing would happen to them, they would go do it. Again, I don't want them to. I don't want that to be necessary to use violence against individuals, even if they deserve it. You know, there's a heck of a lot of cops who deserve to have their head blown off for having framed people and beat the crap out of unarmed people who weren't hurting anybody and things like that, you know, whatever deserved means. But I don't want that to happen. But there's a heck of a lot of people out there who have been tromped on and controlled and oppressed all this time. And if they suddenly feel like they could get away with getting some revenge, they would try it. And I'm here to tell you, most of the revenge that would happen would be against people in government. Now, again, enforcing the law would mean, or not enforcing the law for that day would mean the cops wouldn't defend. They wouldn't protect bureaucrats. They wouldn't protect tax collectors. They wouldn't protect other cops. It also means they wouldn't protect politicians. Now, that, I think, is the key to this. I think this is the elitist statists projecting their own terror of what would happen to them if their control mechanism of the state were to falter for one day. Because I guarantee you there would be a lot of dead politicians if for one day people could do this and get away with it. Again, I'm not condoning that. I would be opposed to that. I don't think I'd bother to go out and defend any politician. I'm not going to put my life on the line for them. But I would actually be against it. But there are a lot of people who have had their lives destroyed, and they've been in prison, they've had their houses stolen, they've had all sorts of nasty things happen to them, that if they could get revenge on the people who did it, and most of those people work for government, politicians, cops, tax collectors, if they could get revenge and get away with it, they would do it. Now, I'm assuming the premise of this movie is anything committed on that day won't be prosecuted then or ever. Because if they say, well, we'll prosecute you the next day, then it wouldn't make any difference. Because how often do they prosecute any crime the same day anyway? So presumably the premise of this statist propaganda movie is that whatever happens this day, it's free reign. Nobody ever gets prosecuted for any of it. And the people who would most suffer from that are the people in government, not the common people. And if a few crooks were, private crooks were dumb enough to think that that would make things easier for them, they'll just find out that it just makes it easier for other people to arm themselves and defend themselves against common crooks. The people that would really endanger, the people who really should be scared of the day that government doesn't use violence, is all of the parasites who every stinking day personally benefit from the initiation of violence against innocent people. Meaning the politicians and the bureaucrats and the cops. The people who have this big gang of thugs enforcing their will on everybody day in and day out, and that big gang will always stick together so that when it robs you, when it bosses you around, when it hurts you, when it ruins your life, you can't do anything because it's big and bad and it's the all-powerful government. But if people thought, if all the victims, I mean, there's 1 million people in cages right now for crimes, quote unquote, where they didn't hurt anybody. If I was one of them, I'd be pretty darn pissed. And I might want to go beat the crap out of somebody or kill somebody for putting me in a cage for a year for not hurting anybody. And yeah, first of all the prisons would be emptied of bad people and good people, which would not be a great thing. In some cases, it would be a great thing to free a bunch of people who were caged, even though they didn't threaten or hurt anybody, which is most of the people who are now caged by the state. So this prediction that, if police weren't there and prosecutors, if government weren't there to protect us for one day, all of civilization would collapse. No, it wouldn't. It would collapse for the parasite class and almost nobody else. The government would be completely freaking doomed. And you would be amazed by the amount of damage that a few 100 million victims of this extortion racket could inflict upon the parasite class in one day if they knew there would be no consequences to it. And again, a lot of it I would be opposed to. I would object to. I think a lot of it would actually target people, and politicians would be dropping like flies, cops would be dropping like flies, tax collectors would be dropping like flies, bureaucrats would be dropping like flies. And I don't want that. I'm not condoning that. Again, I wouldn't at all mind if their buildings and the stuff they used to rob people were stolen or destroyed or whatever, because that's fine with me. It wasn't theirs to begin with. They bought it all with stolen money, so I'd be all for that on this one day of lawlessness. But it's just, I just had to do this little rant when I saw that just overt, blatant statist propaganda movie about here's what would happen if government stops protecting us even for one day. No, if government takes a break for one day, if the country is lawless for one day, the people who would most suffer are the parasites. Oh, by the way, one last thing of what would happen on that one day of lawlessness. It would be the biggest economic boom in the history of the world. Because every transaction, every sale, every deal that could be made would be tax exempt. Because if people did it and didn't report it, and didn't tell anybody about it, and didn't pay taxes on it, that would be the day to do it. So there would suddenly be several $1 trillion worth of economic activity in one stinking day because they knew, hey, today is the day that the parasites won't rob us because we're trading stuff. So it's funny to see the elitist authoritarian view. Again, this is all just based on the short little trailer that I wasn't even expecting. It just came up and I just had to do this rant about it. No, if for one day there was no government enforcement, most of us would be just fine. A few dumb crooks would think they had a chance and they would end up dead by the end of the day. And government would be demolished by all of the victims who would suddenly feel empowered to exact revenge. And again, I don't even like that. I don't like revenge. I don't think punishment is ever a good motive. I want to see freedom happen without having to kill even the stupid people who are acting as mercenaries. But if we're playing the game of predicting what would happen, rather than suggesting what ought to happen, one day of lawlessness where government doesn't enforce anything, most of us would be just fine. The ones who would be completely demolished are the people who work for the parasite class, the people who have gotten away with victimizing several 100 million people with no consequences for themselves for years and years and decades and centuries. So it's just funny to see the parasites putting out this propaganda of, if not for us, you'd be all in trouble. No, if not for their enforcers mindlessly doing what their political masters tell them to do, the political masters wouldn't be there anymore.